If you have been watching YouTube lately, you have probably heard a terrifying narrative about the US Navy running out of firepower. The story claims that our destroyers are emptying their magazines in the Middle East and steaming thousands of miles south to reload. It sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare for the fleet. But that popular internet narrative is actually completely outdated now. Today we are unpacking the actual classified fix, which the mainstream media entirely missed during their frantic coverage of the war. That brilliant engineering fix is the highly anticipated TRAM system, which revolutionizes how we manage our precious combat resources. We will also explore why the real crisis is not how we load the missiles, but how fast our defense industrial base can rebuild them. Imagine a $1 billion Arleigh Burke destroyer firing its very last Tomahawk cruise missile into an enemy command node in the mountains. Amateurs will quickly tell you that this depleted warship immediately becomes a sitting duck, and the entire defensive umbrella collapses. But complex naval warfare is not a simple video game, where an empty weapon slot automatically equates to a total strategic vulnerability. A warship that has fired all its offensive weapons still possesses an incredibly sophisticated array of defensive countermeasures on board. The reality is that Washington is not currently losing sleep over an empty ship navigating the treacherous waters of the Western Pacific. The real fear keeping Pentagon planners awake at night is the terrifying prospect of an empty factory struggling to meet wartime demands. When you look closely at those 96 Mk-41 VLS cells on the deck, you are looking at the absolute backbone of American surface warfare. Every steel module is designed to hold a precision strike weapon, capable of entirely altering the outcome of a major naval battle at sea. However, an empty canister out in the open ocean creates a massive tactical puzzle that requires an elegant engineering solution to resolve. For decades, the accepted wisdom dictated that a warship had to retreat to a secure concrete pier with a massive shore-based loading crane. The closest reliable port facilities with this heavy equipment are usually located over 2,000 nautical miles away at Diego Garcia. Sailing all the way back there means abandoning the combat zone and leaving a critical gap in the line that the enemy can easily exploit. The media loves to dramatize this specific vulnerability because a 3-week transit time sounds like a devastating blow to our military. They paint a grim picture of our advanced technological marvels, being sidelined merely by the absence of a machine to lift heavy cargo. But what those viral videos fail to mention is that the US Navy already tested and validated a revolutionary solution to this exact issue. Let us address the absolute myth that an empty missile module instantly renders an Arleigh Burke destroyer completely defenseless at sea. Armchair analysts on social media confidently assert that a warship without Tomahawks must immediately flee from the active combat zone. They dramatically claim that the regional defense perimeter shatters the exact moment those offensive weapon modules run dry during battle. This fundamental misunderstanding completely ignores the rigorous operational reality of modern naval warfare and tactical fleet deployment. In a high-intensity conflict, the deciding factor is not just stealth or radar cross-section. It is actual magazine depth across the fleet. Magazine depth defines exactly how long a strike group can sustain a high-intensity fight before the combat vessels finally go Winchester. However, going Winchester on land, attack cruise missiles does not mean the multi-billion-dollar warship is suddenly naked against the enemy. Those vertical cells also hold a highly classified mix of standard missiles, which intercept incoming airborne threats with deadly accuracy. A destroyer still possesses incredibly advanced SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors to actively protect the carrier from hostile aircraft swarms. The ship remains a formidable node in the electromagnetic spectrum, utilizing the Aegis combat system to track and destroy incoming threats. To maintain constant pressure on the adversary, the Pentagon relies entirely on the proven tactical doctrine of seamless vessel replacement. Thanks to standard CSG rotation, a depleted destroyer is seamlessly replaced on station, ensuring no gap in the defensive umbrella offshore. When one combat vessel temporarily steps back from the front line, another fully armed destroyer immediately glides forward to take its place. This rotating wall of steel and radar ensures that our global adversaries never find a weak point in the overlapping defensive architecture. The strategic logic here is quite simple. Because maintaining 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers guarantees continuous power projection. If a single ship needs to replenish its advanced weapon modules, the overall combat lethality of the strike group remains totally unaffected. You cannot defeat the American Navy by simply waiting for one specific warship to run out of precision-guided land attack cruise missiles. The enemy hopes for a catastrophic logistical failure. But the rigid military rotation schedule completely denies them that exact opportunity. This continuous cycle of deploying and returning combat units is the firm foundation of our global maritime dominance across the deep oceans. During the operations of Epic Fury, we proved that rotating heavily armed destroyers can successfully suppress any hostile regional military. The staggering volume of firepower delivered in those critical weeks surpassed the total ordnance dropped during the previous Iraq campaign. We are witnessing a huge expenditure of smart missiles, managed by a rigorous surface fleet, rotation combat, deployment execution plan today. To truly understand the mechanical genius of the new reloading system, we must first examine the lethal physics of the swinging pendulum. A standard Tomahawk missile canister is not a forgiving piece of cargo. It is a 20-foot steel instrument packed with high explosive. Lowering this volatile 3,000-pound weapon into a tight steel sleeve requires absolute surgical precision on a completely flat pier. Out on the turbulent open ocean, the warship constantly moves in 6 different axes simultaneously due to the unforgiving maritime weather. Every time the ship pitches forward or rolls sideways, the heavy weapon canister suspended from a crane cable begins swinging violently. This unpredictable relative motion creates a terrifying scenario, where the volatile missile might crash violently against the steel walls. The old methods relied heavily on gravity and luck, which proved to be disastrously inadequate for handling modern precision-guided weapons. The brilliant engineers at the Applied Physics Laboratory eliminated this deadly pendulum effect by designing a completely rigid mechanism. The highly innovative transferable reload at sea method replaces the chaotic swinging cable with incredibly strong hydraulic clamping jaws. This advanced hydraulic rail system is securely bolted directly to the vertical launch module structure, ensuring total dynamic stability. Because the clamping mechanism and the missile cell share the exact same structural frame, the destructive relative motion is eradicated. When the supply ship carefully transfers the heavy canister across the water, the powerful hydraulic arms immediately seize the payload. The rigid rails gently guide the heavy canister horizontally across the deck, perfectly aligning it directly over the targeted empty chamber. An integrated pulley system riding inside the rail slowly rotates the weapon 90 degrees and smoothly lowers it down into the dark tube. The entire sequence is meticulously controlled by hydraulic power instead of gravity, effectively removing sheer luck from the equation. Sailors on board the selected cruisers and destroyers have already validated this incredible engineering breakthrough during ocean exercises, transforming a chaotic 3-week logistical detour into a rapid 4-hour replenishment operation is truly a strategic game-changer. The brilliant engineering behind the new loading system solves the ocean transport problem, but it does not manufacture the actual missiles. The true vulnerability of the U.S. Navy is not a lack of firepower. It is the massive bottleneck in the defense industrial base factories. We use incredibly expensive precision strike weapons built at a slow peacetime rate to destroy cheap mass-produced enemy combat drones. The Pentagon's blind spot is not lethality. Its greatest weakness during prolonged warfare is actually long-term sustainment. During the very first 5 weeks of intense fighting, the naval fleet aggressively burned through roughly 10 entire years of production. We are facing an asymmetrical mathematical crisis, where our industrial base simply cannot replace precision munitions fast enough anymore. Every single Tomahawk requires thousands of highly specialized components, demanding a massive production lead time of 18 whole months. This fundamental manufacturing reality reveals the uncomfortable truth about our current capacity to wage a prolonged global naval campaign. You cannot artificially accelerate the physics of metal forging and weapon assembly just because the physics of modern warfare demands it. As our highly capable combat ships repeatedly drain their deep magazines, the immense pressure on the slow industrial supply chain spikes. The terrifying reality is that adversary nations are currently manufacturing cheap, unguided rockets much faster than we forge interceptors. Because the new hydraulic loading mechanism merely transports existing weapons, we desperately need a completely new strategic mindset. Instead of building more $2 billion destroyers, military strategists are arguing for minimally manned arsenal ships right now. These highly theoretical missile mules are essentially floating vertical launch farms, heavily slaved to the radar of a command ship. By deploying these heavily armed yet inexpensive cargo vessels, the maritime fleet could easily flood the entire combat zone with fire. We must also seriously consider the highly innovative Rapid Dragon program, which utilizes massive military cargo planes to drop weapons. Modified cargo aircraft, like the massive C-17, can easily drop dozens of palletized cruise missiles, overwhelming the enemy air defenses. This bold airborne strategy effectively shifts the heavy offensive burden away from the highly stressed surface fleet during a major war. To survive the brutal mathematics of warfare, we must immediately pivot towards scaling production for these alternative combat platforms. Relying exclusively on our exquisite Aegis destroyers to deliver every single precision strike is a fundamentally flawed wartime strategy. The devastating asymmetry of modern combat dictates that we must completely separate the expensive radar nodes from the cheap missile trucks. While reloading faster at sea is undeniably a tremendous logistical victory, carrying 10 times the ammunition initially is far superior. Flooding the theater with inexpensive mobile magazines ensures that the military will absolutely never run out of deep strike combat options. Rethinking the foundational architecture of the mighty naval fleet is the only proven method to outlast a highly industrialized adversary. The incredible engineering marvel of the new hydraulic loading system certainly solves the immediate tactical ocean transport problem. However, we must honestly ask ourselves if we are merely putting an incredibly expensive technological bandage on a massive, fatal wound. The multi-billion-dollar dilemma currently facing the Pentagon is a brutal choice between exquisite quality and overwhelming quantity. Do we continue investing massive fortunes into beautifully complex reloading systems for a handful of highly advanced stealth destroyers? Or do we dramatically shift our entire naval doctrine toward deploying massive fleets of relatively cheap and expendable missile carriers? Building a sustainable defense industrial base that can rapidly churn out thousands of cruise missiles requires a total wartime commitment. The modern battlefield brutally punishes any military force that relies heavily on an incredibly fragile and slow manufacturing chain. We have successfully proven that we can effortlessly transfer heavy weapons across a violently pitching deck during a massive ocean storm. But that beautiful mechanical ballet means absolutely nothing if the supply vessels arriving from the homeland factories are entirely empty. The ultimate tactical reality check is acknowledging that our sophisticated adversaries are carefully watching every single move we make. They are rapidly building massive underground weapon factories while we are busy celebrating our magnificent maritime crane mechanisms. True naval supremacy in the 21st century will firmly belong to the nation that can actually sustain the longest, relentless barrage. We must absolutely redesign our strategic approach to incorporate high-volume floating magazines alongside our premium combat interceptors. Future commanders will desperately need hundreds of disposable missile mules to safely absorb the inevitable initial wave of drone swarms. Integrating containerized weapon systems into commercial cargo hulls could instantly multiply our effective combat striking power today. This transition away from exclusively premium platforms towards massive weapon redundancy will absolutely anger traditionalist admirals. The brutal arithmetic of modern warfare does not care about proud maritime traditions or the beautiful aesthetics of sleek gray warships. We are currently standing at a terrifying strategic crossroads where our brilliant technological achievements might cause our downfall. Perfecting the incredibly complex art of reloading empty tubes at sea is undeniably a magnificent triumph of American mechanical engineering. Yet the absolute masterstroke of military strategy would be ensuring those heavily armed floating arsenals never run out of ammunition. The undeniable reality is that a massive war of attrition requires an overwhelming industrial output that we currently lack in this country. We simply cannot rely on the slow artisanal production of expensive guided weapons to effectively deter a highly industrialized foreign foe. Every single dollar spent on a complex reloading crane is a dollar violently ripped away from producing another critical cruise missile. The brilliant naval engineers have done their heroic part by miraculously solving the terrifying physics of the dangerous ocean pendulum. Now it is entirely up to the politicians in Washington to rapidly fund and massively expand our critical defense manufacturing capabilities. Without a coordinated effort to drastically increase factory production, we will just end up with beautifully reloaded empty weapon tubes. The incredible success of the tram system is merely the very first step in a much longer and far more painful journey toward our readiness. We must discard our outdated peacetime mentality and fully embrace the harsh logistical realities of a massive global superpower conflict. So, here is the ultimate multi-billion-dollar question for you regarding the terrifying future of our incredibly powerful naval combat fleet. Should the U.S. Navy focus its massive budget entirely on perfecting at-sea reloading mechanisms for its highly advanced stealth destroyers, or should we bring back cheap arsenal ships and modified cargo vessels just to completely flood the active combat zone with heavy missiles? Let me know your brilliant tactical takedown in the comments section below, and I will personally pin the absolute best strategic answer.